If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Tonight I'm talking to John Scott. I first seen John's TikTok videos a couple of weeks back, well, a month or so back when I started following him. Some really entertaining ones there. And I noticed one where he mentioned about his national service. And I've never spoke to anyone who's done national service before. So I thought I'll give him a shout, see if he'd agree to come on, and graciously he has. Hiya, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
And again, like I said earlier, thanks for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Not at all. My national service was a long time ago now, so I may not remember it that well, but I can remember bits of it.
Well, we'll see how we get on with it. I mean, it's the same what I ask everybody, so it's the normal 5 questions. So it's where did you grow up? Why did you join the military? We know why you did. What was it like when you were serving? And why did you leave? And what have you done since? So if you just like to start off by giving us an introduction of where you grew up and what it was like joining the military.
Okay, well, I've grown up. I've always lived in the southeast of England all my life. I was born in Guildford. During the war, my family moved to Oxford to live with my grandmother. And I particularly, it was not actually in Oxford, but just outside. And I particularly remember a mulberry tree that I used to climb up. And I used to have a joke with my grandmother saying, "Granny, tell John where John gone to." And it was always up the mulberry tree. The way that children do, and amuse themselves. How did I come to join how did I come to do national service? Well, in those days, everybody had to. At the time that I reached my whatever it was birthday, and therefore had to join, we were on holiday in Wales, and I got a train from Dyfi Junction to Welshpool to Oswestry, which is where the training was in Oswestry for anybody in the Royal Artillery. And I did my basic training, which took, I forget, 9 weeks, was it, or 12 weeks or something, some number of weeks that I can't now remember. And that was basically sort of A, square bashing, and B, getting your boots to shine. I was lucky there because I'd done this sort of thing while at school. Everybody did at school in those days. And we had a system called SPIPO, which means spit and polish. And curiously enough, the way the army does things, as far as I can make out, is it takes a perfectly good pair of boots and it stamps them with fiendish bubbles, which you then have to get out before you can shine them. And this takes an hour or so, many hours of spit and polish to fill up the bits between the bubbles with polish. And I suppose the Army's way of working this out is that we've got all these new recruits. We've got to give them something pointless to do for several hours, and we'll give them that. They have another system on. They give you a belt with brass fittings to it, and again, they purposely make the brasses all rough, and you have to spend hours with Brasso rubbing them, so you can get them shiny and fit to pass on parade. Again, just, I assume, to give these recruits something to do. Well, fair enough, no doubt. Why did I join? Well, as I say, everybody had to, and I could have possibly have got out of it if I'd wanted to be a doctor. I have a feeling that some people didn't have to do national service, but basically in those days, everybody did, unless you were going to be a doctor or whatever it was. Well, I wasn't going to be a doctor. At least I didn't think I was. I hadn't really any idea what I was going to do, other than I'd managed to get a place at university, and I was going to go on there. So there we were. As I say, I had the advantage of having done military stuff in school, which I was reasonably successful, as a matter of fact. And so I knew all about spit and polish. At one point in the army, in my early days in the army, I was given a 3-ton truck to look after, and I had to get it ready for the annual inspection. And what I simply could not begin to believe was that you would clean the underneath the working part of a mudguard. And for Pete's sake, the mud guards are there to collect mud. And if they're covered in mud, that's how they should be. But
nothing much changed.
The army's view is quite different. The army's view is you must solemnly drive them to the washdown, squirt them with water, and we're very short of water now, but we weren't then, I suppose, to get all the mud off. What's the point of getting mud off a mudguard, I asked myself. However, there we are. I joined in with all the fun to do that, and I had, as I say, I had the advantage that I'd done a certain amount at school anyway, and I managed to get onto a thing called WOSB, War Office Selection Board, which was what you had to do if you wanted to become an officer. And I went to WOSB, and as a matter of fact, I did not pass the first time. I was given a thing called deferred watch, which means you've done okay, but you're immature. And then I was immature. I was only just 18, for goodness sake. So I went back to the regiment, and I think it was that point that I had to clean the underneath of mud guards, much to my disgust and horror. Anyway, I then went to WOSB again, and this time I did pass. WOSB consists of giving you, again, pointless tasks. They give you a 10-foot wide ditch and an 8-foot long plank and some rope. Again, the rope isn't quite long enough either. And if you have to devise a way of getting across this ditch. I forget quite what, I can't remember what my so-called command task was, but I must have managed it somehow, and eventually passed WOSB, and was sent to Mons Officer Cadet School, and that's where I ended up being trained to be an officer. And I was there, I think it was 16 weeks. And that was...
So at the time of national service, did everyone just accept that they had to do it, or was the people who, like, obviously tried to get out of it? Was there any? I mean, could you imagine bringing national service in nowadays? I know they mentioned it, but it's a very different beast that they were looking at implementing. Well, was there opposition to it then, or was it just it's expected, everyone mucks in and on you go?
Well, what you must remember, of course, it was not all that long after the war. And during the war, unless you were a conscientious objector, you bloody well fought for the country, because otherwise you'd been overrun. So it wasn't so horrendous. I mean, yes, there was opposition. Well, it was sort of mental opposition, if you like, that you thought, why on earth have I got to waste 2 years when I could be beavering away earning money? Why have I got to waste 2 years doing the army service? But it doesn't seem that horrendous. Let me just look at something. Yes. So that was... I would say that people like me were not particularly keen on joining the army. Given the choice, we wouldn't have done. But since everybody did, we all did, more or less without complaint. I mean, my friends at the time who were the same age all joined at roughly the same time I did. And some became officers and some didn't. But it was accepted that you did your 2 years and came out and did something else.
So, did you have a choice in what regiment you joined as well? You said you went off to Oswestry Street to join the artillery.
Well,
I mean, I was artillery as well, by the way.
I think I must have had a choice, but I can't remember for the life of me. Remember, I did in fact join the Royal Artillery.
Yeah.
But I can't think of a good reason to have done so, other than perhaps I thought it was good to learn something, like learn how to fire guns and the like. And I certainly did learn a great deal, because at various times, I mean, quite apart from basic training, when you learn to bash a square, as it's called, afterwards I always went on courses as often as I could, and I learned about surveying. An interesting thing about surveying, if I may just break in, is that you use a thing called a theodolite, and the most difficult part of using a theodolite is to get it back in its box, because it only just.
I know where you're coming from with that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I went on courses, as I say, for surveying and sound ranging and radar and various things like that. Now, for instance, sound ranging is interesting. You wouldn't have thought that by simply listening to enemy guns, you could do much. But actually, what you do is you have a line of 6 microphones. You spread them out widely separated near the battlefield, and these 6 microphones are all connected to a central point. And by measuring the time interval between the noise of the enemy gun hitting microphone 1 and microphone 2, you can draw a line as to where it must be. But then you can do that again for microphones 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, and 5 and 6. And you eventually get 5 lines, which hopefully all more or less converge at a point. And that's where the enemy gun is. So you can fire off a vicious missile at the said enemy gun, hoping it's roughly where you thought it was. And as a matter of fact, the thing that I did rather enjoy doing when I joined my regiment was to be the enemy gun. And what you do is you take a few bricks of so-called gun cotton, which are sort of white things about the size of a brick, and with a hole in the middle into which you put a more concentrated gun cotton, and an even smaller hole in the middle of that into which you put a so-called detonator. And into the detonator you put a time fuse of certain length. When you then light the time fuse, and the best way to do that is to hold a match head against it and rub the match head with a match box. That starts the fuse going, and you are then given very, very strict instructions that you must walk, not run away, because if you run, you might fall over.
Yeah.
You get blown to bits. So I had fun. I obeyed all these instructions, and I did walk away. And but I was in the rather jolly position of going up to the regiment after and saying, "Where do you think the gun was?" And they could say, "Well, we made out it was there." And I said, "No, it was actually over here." I knew where I'd blown up the gun cotton. To be fair, actually, they got it right, I think, nearly all the time. But I knew the exact map reference of where I'd made the bang. So that was fun. And yes, I quite enjoyed my military service. I made some good friends. For example, I played cricket for the regiment, and one of the places we went was Berlin. Now, in those days, Berlin was a vicious place to get to because it was situated in the middle of East Germany, miles and miles from West Germany. I was stationed in West Germany, but to get to Berlin, you had, I think it was called the Berlin Corridor. It was a very narrow stretch of Autobahn, and you weren't allowed to stray off it for even a yard or two. As long as you stuck to the Autobahn, you were all right. You arrived in Berlin. Berlin itself was divided into English, French, American, and Russian sectors. There was no wall in those days, but nevertheless, it was perfectly impossible to get in. Well, not impossible, but difficult and covered in formality to get into the eastern part of it, the Russian part of it. Checkpoint Charlie, I seem to remember, was the relevant point where the two met, and I did go to the Russian part of it, and I was vastly impressed with the Russian War Memorial simply because there were so many of them. I remember my grandmother saying during the war, these Russians are wonderful. They don't seem to mind how many of them are killed. They keep going. And they did. And we ought, much as we may have doubts about Russia now, we ought to remember that during the war we depended on them to a large extent. But
very much so, yeah.
Would we have won the war without them? Well, maybe, but not for a very long time. They were responsible to a large extent for subduing the might of Germany, were they not? Anyway, the excuse I had for going to Berlin was to play cricket there. I can't remember the results of the match, but I was representing my regiment for cricket. I think we played actually in East Berlin, from what I remember. And as I say, there was no wall at the time, but I did go to Berlin later when there was a wall, and I was bold enough to approach the wall from the eastern side. And I was told to stop by an East German guard, and he said halt, so I did stop. And I said, I didn't have, my German was not very good, but I said, why? And he said, because it's forbidden. And my German wasn't good enough to enlarge on this fact to any great extent. So I thought, okay, it's forbidden. So I will stop and I'll go and look at it from a different angle. So that's the Berlin Wall. Although, as I say, when I was doing my national service, there was certainly no Berlin Wall, but it was nevertheless covered in formality to get into East Berlin. And the notable thing about East Berlin, in marked contrast to West Berlin, was that it was a complete shambles. You know, there were still bullet holes in the walls, and no shops, or I can't say no shops, but very few shops. The East Berliners couldn't get anything, couldn't buy anything, whereas in West Berlin, by this time, the time that I was there, West Berlin was sort of fairly luxurious and normal, and you could buy whatever you wanted. So that's. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, that's fine. So can you remember what regiment you served with while you were in Germany?
Yes, it was a I think it was a locating regiment. It meant it did surveying, radar, sound ranging, and I'm sure there must have been something else, but I can't think what it was.
Was it 9-4 locating?
Yes, I think it was. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they lasted on for a while. I mean, they were still around when I joined.
Were they?
Yeah. I joined in 1985. I mean, it went on for quite a while after that as well. I can't remember when it disbanded. Sorry?
Do you imply that they're no longer around? There's no.
I can't remember when they disbanded, but they're no longer around as a regiment.
Right.
Some of the batteries did go around to some went into suspended animation, and some joined other regiments.
Yeah.
And the guys just dispersed around to different regiments, which happens obviously quite a lot.
Of course.
I mean, the army was a lot bigger when you were in it than it is now.
Indeed, yes, very much so. Yes, that's quite right.
So basic training at Oswestry. I mean, I remember I've spoke to people who served there with their basic training, and I'd imagine that national service, the training was a lot tougher than it is even when I joined in nearly 40 odd years ago. Can you remember much of the?
Yes.
Was it brutal? Was it a shock?
Well, yes, it was certainly a shock, and it was fairly tough. Although, luckily, I was put it this way: it was much tougher for people who hadn't done the corps at school.
Yeah.
I had done the court school, so I knew how to do the spit and polish stuff. Um, and because the first few days you have literally nothing to do except either A, go out on the square every now and then and be shouted at, or B, once you've got back, clean your boots. Namely, to use this ghastly spit and polish business, which takes hours and hours and hours of patient work to get an immaculate looking shine. Now, in fact, it was perfectly possible, and some people did, to go out and buy smooth boots without these bobbles that the army had carefully put in them. And you didn't need any of the spit and polish. You just needed a quick brush, and they were shining like anything. I didn't do that, but it was perfectly possible to do it and get round this fiendish scheme that the army had worked out.
Yeah, I must admit, I've bulled a few pair of boots in my time and polished the odd things as well, mainly punishment for something.
I bet you have, and
Yeah,
brasses as well.
yeah. I think the strangest thing I ever had to polish was, believe it or not, was an orange. That
Really?
was yeah, that was we managed it, but it was it wasn't fun, and it was punishment. I was in the guard room for a period of time. Let's say.
Were
I
you
had to do that. Yeah.
Were you indeed? Yes. Well, there you are.
Yeah, not for the first time or the last time.
Quite. That was one of the things, of course, I had to do when I was lucky enough to get a commission. Was I had to inspect the guard and people in the guard room and make sure they were doing all the right things, which I didn't particularly enjoy, but I somehow managed it. So there we are.
Did you find it very different? Like once you got your commission or gained your commission, being treated differently and stuff like that.
Yes, I did find it very different. In that, well, when I was just an ordinary soldier, you could be shouted at and told, made to do pointless things, or even not pointless things, all the time, and I can't say it was particularly enjoyable. Whereas when I was an officer, there were still pointless things to do, but sort of being able to tell people to do them was a help. And,
so when getting your commission, does that change? Would that have changed your length of national service? Or
no,
does the length of your national service stay the same?
It was 2 years for everybody.
Yeah.
And but I didn't get I mean, if you were sort of highly mature and efficient and everything, you would have you'd have passed WASB after about, I don't know, 12 weeks in the army, I guess. Then you'd have had your 16 weeks of officer training, and then you'd have been in a regiment as a second lieutenant. In my case, I didn't become a second lieutenant for about 6 months, I should think. But I'm sure it was perfect. I'm sure it was very good for me, and you know, showing me that life wasn't all roses and whatever the expression is.
Yeah, sweetness. It's not all sweetness and light, is it? So,
Exactly.
what was it like going to Germany for the first time?
Well, that was fun, as a matter of fact. It was more or less. Had I been abroad before? I've been to the Channel Islands, but I'm not sure that counts as abroad. So yes, my first step on foreign soil was getting off a military train in, I assume it was probably Holland. I think Harwich to the Hook of Holland, I think was the route, and walking to another military train and getting off and going into the middle of Germany somewhere. Well, yes, being in an officer's mess with a whole load of other second lieutenants and so on was, yes, I think it's fair to say more fun.
Yes, shenanigans.
Yes,
Hijinks and the mess, you mean?
hijinks and all that sort of stuff. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they have stupid ideas of what to do on is it called a mess night or something? And the junior officer, which was me for quite a while, has to say the right things. I think we have to say Mr. Vice the King or something like that.
Yes.
In those days. And quite why you said Mr. Vice, I can't remember, but I think I got that right, more or less.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And yes, it was fun, but I didn't really want to do it. And,
so what year did you join? Sorry, I forgot to ask.
I think it was somewhere around 56, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds right. Yes. A long time ago, in other words.
I'm just making a note of that for later on.
And things ended up were very different then than they are now.
Yeah.
You say you're not in the army anymore?
No. I left 12 years ago.
12 years ago, right?
Yeah, 12. Yeah, I joined in 1985 and left in 2012.
Oh yes, right.
So yeah, did a bit of time, like.
Absolutely.
I mean, like you said, it's a very different army now to what it was even when I left. And it was a very different army then, even from when I joined.
Even more different.
So, I mean, for yourself, it'd been completely different.
Even more different compared to 56, no doubt, or even 58 or whatever. Yes. But although I was pleased to get out, I enjoyed it while I was there. Most of the time. I can't say the basic training was all that wonderful, but
no, not for anyone.
Most of the time was fine.
So what did you plan on doing after you left the national service? And the next question that lay into that was: do you think your national service helped you throughout life? Did it make you look at things a different way?
Absolutely, no doubt about that. In that, if you've been through basic training in orchestra, you can go through almost anything. It's not quite, makes it sound worse than it is, or was. But nevertheless, it's a good way to knock yourself into shape, as it were, and realise that not everybody has such a good time as everybody else.
No, I mean,
yes,
it's a big melting pot of everyone in it gets put in there.
That's right. Yes, I would say quite definitely that I was improved by doing 2 years national service, and arguably, therefore, everybody ought to. But is it a good plan for everybody to, in quotes, waste, unquote, 2 years? Because from a point of view of a career path, you have to argue that it is, to some extent at least, a waste. That if I could have waved a magic wand, got rid of national service, I'd have started my career 2 years earlier, or started my university 2 years earlier, and then my career 2 years earlier in turn, which might have been an improvement, but then I wouldn't have been the same person. There's a lot to be said for doing national service, and maybe they should do it for everybody. I don't know.
So do you think that, I mean, I don't think modern society could handle it that way. I can't imagine anyone being told to do national service nowadays. Whether that's just because we've become soft as a culture, or that the country's changed, which it obviously has. And like you said, I mean, it was so close to, the end of the Second World War that everyone, there was still fear in the air there anyway. I mean, there's fear now, whether that's just because the press are pushing the narrative like they normally do, or there's genuine feeling that someone could kick off, type of thing. I don't know. I'm not a strategic analyst of any description or anything.
But
no.
I mean, I had a sponge bag, for example, which my mother had made out of barrage balloon material. Do you remember barrage balloons?
Yeah. Oh, bloody hell. If you still had that now, probably worth a few quid on eBay.
Yeah, I shouldn't wonder.
So what did you move on to after your national service then?
Well, I did. In effect, I did 4 years at Oxford because I was on a scheme called ICI conversion, which I didn't. I hadn't done any science at school. I did Latin and Greek, and admittedly maths as well. Latin, Greek, and maths. And ICI were offering 12 places a year at Oxford, and 12 at Cambridge, and 12 at London, I think it was, to do an extra year before you start converting to science. And I did this extra year and converted to science and ended up 3 years after that year. So I did 4 years at Oxford altogether, of which I did 1 year converting and 1 year doing essentially physics. And then the last 2 years I did engineering. And what does that lead to? Well, even as I was getting quite near the end of my Oxford career, I still couldn't think what on earth to do. But Oxford had a thing called the Oxford University Appointments Board, as I'm sure other universities do. And they gave me reams of paper to plough through. And having ploughed through these reams of paper, I decided that what I would like to be was what is now called a chartered patent or patent attorney. In other words, somebody to whom people come with inventions, and you advise them what to do with their invention, how to protect it, and that kind of thing. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is a brilliant career because everything is new. So that was terrific. I'm reminded.
I mean, that's like I'm just thinking, that's a bit of a jump from like being, ICI, chemical engineer, patent lawyer. But then again, I suppose that you'd have to understand as well the stuff that's coming into you. You'd have to have a little bit of an engineering background type of thing.
Yes.
Did that help?
Well, put it this way: to be a patent attorney in America, they do it the other way around. You need to be a lawyer first, and you pick up the science such as you need on the way round. In this country, on the contrary, in order to become a patent attorney, you have complicated scientific papers that you have to be able to define the invention. So that you get you read the science first, and the law comes later.
Right.
And that's something. I've just been reminded of something that might amuse you, and that is that during the vacation at Oxford, it must have been, I became, for at least for one short week, the champion ice cream salesman of the whole country.
Of the country?
Because I got this vacation job selling ice cream, and I found that if you made sure to have your van in pretty much exactly the same place at the same time every day, that people would come to you because they knew you were coming. And at any rate, by hook or by crook, I did manage to sell a great deal of ice cream. And as I say, I was a champion ice cream salesman, but just for 1 week. I'm sure I was able.
Yeah, but not everyone can say that, can they?
Not everyone can say that.
No.
And I'm sure I was overtaken the following week, so it didn't last very long. But it was good stuff while it lasted, and it paid quite well, as well as providing one with a certain amount of free ice cream. If I was honest.
So I can imagine being a patent attorney that you've seen some very interesting and some very weird inventions come across your desk.
Yes, I have, and I dare say that I'm not allowed to tell you about most of them, but nevertheless, I will tell you about one,
Right.
and that is imagine you're trying to perfect your golf swing. You can buy all sorts of complicated pieces of elastic and so on, whereby you have a tethered ball and you hit it, and the elastic brings it back and tells you what you would have done in real life and so on. Well, a rather neat idea that came to me was, instead of all this elastic, why not have a hole slightly bigger than the ball through the club, so that if you hit a perfect shot, the ball stays exactly where it is,
Yeah.
because it's gone through the hole.
Yeah.
That was
I
rather
don't know how
neat.
practical that'd be.
I don't think it would. I'm not sure how well it would work in practice, but
No.
but
I can understand the theory, but yeah,
hmm,
that'd be quite. You'd have to have a levitating ball, wouldn't
yes, but it's a neat idea, I think.
you?
Uh,
I suppose if you could, like, a magnetic one, keep it off the ground or by air or something. Yeah, I'm going to start thinking about that about 3 o'clock in the morning, I think.
right. Well, please do, and I'm
If I
retired.
come up with something, I'll give you a shout.
Give me a shout. Yeah, feel free. Give me a shout anytime, because it's a pleasure talking to you, Frankie, and happy to
So,
do.
I mean, the one thing the next thing I'd like to touch on, if you don't mind, the way is the way I found you, which was TikTok.
Right.
I mean, I know that your grandchildren got you into it, but
Yes, it is.
it's just crazy.
It is.
It's some of the videos are great. I just love the way you accept any question from people and just answer them.
Well, I try to, yes. And I mean, I spend time with my grandchildren, with one grandchild in particular, who is extremely helpful. And she says that rather than me think up subjects I could talk about, of which there are literally thousands, I should think, if one sat down and did nothing else for a week, um, surely it's better to take note of what people have asked for and try and answer them. And so far, there's been absolutely no shortage of people saying, "What about X, Y, Z?" And I try and answer as many as I can. I'm sure there are still literally hundreds of X, Y, Zs that I have not yet answered, but that I probably will given time. And I hope so anyway.
So I think we've really touched on everything we can at the moment. I know it's been a bit of a short podcast, this one. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that has come up?
Not that I can think of, I don't think. I'll tell you what, let me just glance, as they say, at notes that I made. Well, I think we've probably talked about nearly everything. Sound, waving, wine leaves, erotic version for Holden Golf Club, ice cream sale. Yes, well, the last note I made is, I don't know if you're going to ask me what do I enjoy, but I enjoy the things I do for TikTok, namely the dances I do. I enjoy having my hair slightly purple. I enjoy entertaining, and I enjoy.
I've seen the purple hair one, yeah.
Yes, right. And I enjoy Cocker Spaniels, which we have one or two, and they keep visiting us as well. Last week we had 5, of whom 3 are visiting and 2 are resident. And they're fun and splendid dogs in every way, I think.
High energy dogs.
High energy dog, just so.
Yeah, keep you young. If we can go back to your national service again, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah.
So I know we touched on, would it be advisable to, try and instigate it in the country now? And I don't think it would be. I really don't think it would be, because I don't think we'd be able to.
Might be advisable, but impractical. I think if you could wave a magic wand and control everybody's thinking, I think it would do everybody good to do national service. But since we're not going to do that, It probably doesn't.
No,
doesn't
I mean, I don't think modern society would be able to
I think you're right.
cope with it. I mean, you'd have to make it law, and then
Yeah. Yes, you would.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mind
we
you,
haven't got we haven't got enough prisons.
what if there was another war?
Yeah.
Supposing the Third World War broke out tomorrow, where would the soldiers come from?
Well, I mean, it's the same as any previous war, really, all the way back to Napoleon. So the standing army goes out, meets it, gets battered, and everybody else gets conscripted. The standing army is only there to halt the tide or to stem the flow towards wherever it's coming from, and the rest has to be brought from the public and reserves.
Well, I think
so. It's going to, if it does kick off, it's going to happen.
If you tried to introduce national service now, it would be very unpopular. People would be very annoyed, and it probably wouldn't work. And the world is so different now that it's not so much an army you need; it's a button to press and fire off the bomb.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a guy a couple of weeks back. He was an American. He'd been in the Foreign Legion, and then he started in the Foreign Legion as an American before he joined the American Army, and then ended up working for the State Department for many, many years as a contractor. And we got onto the subject towards the end of Ukraine and places like that, and World War III and everything. And he was just like, "Yeah, just nuke everyone." I was like, "Well, that's not the way to think about it." He goes, "Tactical nuclear weapon, one in there, one in there, one in there. That'll stop everybody." And I'm just like, that's right. That's a bit extreme, but I could understand what he was saying.
In theory, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, you remember Korea. Yes. So MacArthur was sacked from Korea because he wanted to basically nuke China and turn the bottom of China into glass. And he was all for that.
And I think I'm right in saying that the first officer or the first person killed in the Korean War, anyway, an early person, was a national serviceman.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yes. In those days, you joined, and if you got sent to Korea, then that was it. You did get sent to Korea, and if you died, you died. Yeah. And it's difficult to imagine now, but it was nevertheless true, as you and I both know.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a volunteer army is great. I mean, when I joined in '85, there wasn't really much going on. Northern Ireland, that was about it, really. So the threat of violence, let's say, wasn't really in your mind. No. I spent more time dodging fists in the NAAFI bar than bullets in him. That type of thing. Yeah. And then later on, as things heated up, and the Gulf War and Bosnia, then Iraq and Afghanistan, things changed. I spoke to a guy, one of my old battery commanders. He ended up colonel. And he was the commanding officer of the Army Training Regiment now at Pirbright, and he was the commanding officer there. And he said, "You got to remember when he was there, Iraq and Afghanistan was going on, and we have a volunteer army now. So when they joined, them lads and lasses who were joining the army there knew that within 18 months of them joining, they were either going to be in Iraq or Afghanistan. And the people out there, there's good people out there, and they still want to join the army. It's just the way it is. It all is at the moment, where it's difficult for them to get in. Civic companies are running it. I don't know really the ins and outs why people can't get in. But I'd advise, I'd hope that the people would want to join for the right reasons, not being forced into it because there's going to be conflict. It is a good life. Not that's not to say it's for everybody. No, but I enjoyed it. I did 27 years. I didn't want to leave. It was quite scary becoming a civvy for me.
So you didn't want to leave. Why did you leave?
Had to. At the age I was, you only do. My contract was for 22 years.
Right. You reached the end of it.
I'd reached the end of it. I ended up doing 27 because a year was for the Queen.
Right.
And then there was a fair bit of, let's say, unreckonable service that I owed the army
right.
for various stints on holidays that I shouldn't have been having, let's say, and time in Nick. So I did a fair bit. I think 396 days, all told, in my first 5 years in the army.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a bit of a naughty boy in them days.
Yeah.
Nothing really bad. Just going AWOL all the time. I just want to stay at home now and again.
Oh, right.
So it wasn't, not really bad.
No.
It's just one of them things. And you grow out of it. You grow out of that behaviour, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely.
You mature,
Mm.
type of thing. I don't think anyone in the military actually does mature until they leave the military, because they're all
Oh,
just
you
big
think
kids.
so?
Yeah, they're
That's
just big
interesting.
kids. That's all we are. It's like a big boys club.
That's an interesting thought. So,
I've had that mentioned to me a fair few times that I wouldn't say that serving soldiers and say anyone who's in the military can come across sometimes as immature.
yes.
And I think it's just we tend to laugh at everything and
Yes.
try not to take things too serious, because if you do, especially if you're out on a tour or something like that, if you're going to be taking everything serious, you're just going to you just fold, you just break.
You'd curl up and burst into tears, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
No, quite right.
Whether that's a good thing because you're laughing and you handle it that way, and a lot of people then find that they can't deal with emotions and stuff, and that comes later on. But that's not what we're not here to talk about that.
Mm.
So anyway, John, I'd like to say thank you for coming on the podcast. I think there might be a few more questions in the comments when this comes out about national service and stuff like that, especially with us. I know the government or the previous government hinted that it might come back. Don't think it will. I don't think it ever will. But I'm not. It's not my decision.
Right. Well, Frank, it's been a pleasure.
I'd just like to say thank you.
I've enjoyed talking to you. If you do have other questions, come back to me by all means. Always happy to.
I want to start sending you questions on TikTok and see how many you answer.
Okay. Yes, fine. Do by all means.
Right. I'll just end the recording there now. 2 seconds.
Okay, Frank.
I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I enjoyed recording it. If you could just hit the like button, and also if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, that'd be great, because it'll help the channel grow. The more people will see it, the bigger it'll get, and the more guests I can get on, and the more people I can talk to. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, like I said. Look forward to the next one. Hopefully it'll be out next week as normal. Bye-bye now.